we have breaking news tonight. And this one is not just another headline. This is history.
Word that the Supreme Court has issued a ruling on the extent of presidential immunity from criminal prosecution for conduct alleged to involve official acts during the tenure of President Trump.
The United States Supreme Court has issued a major ruling on one of the most dangerous and unanswered questions in American democracy. How much immunity does a president have from criminal prosecution for official acts done while in office? And listen, this is not some technical legal footnote. This is the big one we've all been waiting for.
It's consequential. It's really interesting that the Supreme Court in 248 years of our history has never actually ruled on this. So it is big and sweeping. And I have our political panel looking over this right now. Andy McCarthy, Chief Justice John Roberts has the writing on this. He's got the pen. Is that significant?
Because in 248 years of American history, the Supreme Court has never had to rule on this issue directly. Not like this. Never. But tonight, they finally did. And what they just decided will reshape the presidency, not only for Trump, but for every president from this day forward.
It's very significant. This is the most important case of the term in terms of the long-term interests of the executive branch, in terms of the short-term interests of Donald Trump. And it looks like, at least within the bounds of clear executive authority, what Chief Justice Roberts is saying is that the president clearly has immunity from prosecution.
From the court, it does find this. Under our constitutional structure of separated powers, the nature of presidential power entitles a former president to absolute immunity from criminal prosecution for actions within his conclusive and preclusive constitutional authority. He is entitled to at least presumptive immunity from prosecution for all his official acts. There is no immunity for unofficial acts. That's the first blush we've got on this. It looks like a 6-3 split. We've got the dissent by Justice Sotomayor, Kagan, and Jackson join that. There is a kind of split decision on some of these. Somebody joins in one part, not in another part, but that's the overall holding of the court. So what it means now, we'll have to dig into this and see if they tell us now, how do you decide an official act versus an unofficial act? Because that's going to be critical, having now said the president does have absolute immunity from criminal prosecution for actions within his conclusive and preclusive constitutional authority. We'll dig in, see how they define those official acts, and look for a little bit more from you from the opinion. But at first blush, this looks like it is going to be a win for the argument for presidential immunity when it comes to allegations of criminal activity.
And yes, that matters. Chief Justice John Roberts wrote the opinion, and if you understand the court, you know what that signals. This is not a narrow decision. This is not a small ruling. This is the court laying down a new constitutional framework. A framework that could decide whether a former president can ever be held accountable, or whether the office becomes a kind of legal fortress. One legal analyst said it plainly: this is the most important decision of the term, not just for Trump, but for the long-term power of the executive branch itself. Here's what the Supreme Court ruled. At first glance, the decision appears to be a 6-3 split along ideological lines. Justices Sotomayor, Kagan, and Jackson dissented, and the ruling draws a line. But it's a line with enormous consequences. Absolute immunity for actions within a president's core constitutional authority, presumptive immunity for all official acts, no immunity at all for unofficial acts. Let that sink in. If what a president did falls inside what the court considers official, the shield goes up. But if it's unofficial, they're exposed. They face the law like anyone else. And now the entire battle becomes one question. Not did he do it? Not even was it criminal? The question that now changes everything is this: was it an official act or an unofficial act? Because that single definition will decide whether these prosecutions survive or collapse. That's what the lower courts will now have to do. They must examine the evidence and go act by act, charge by charge, and decide which category each one falls into. Meaning, this isn't over. It's just moving into its most dangerous phase. But here's where it gets even bigger. At the same time, the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals issued a ruling that directly impacts presidential legal defenses. And it closes another door that people have whispered about for years. The court determined that a president cannot pardon himself. That idea, "I'll just self-pardon and erase the case," is now treated as legally invalid. They essentially say, a pardon is mercy. Mercy is something granted from one person to another. You cannot grant mercy to yourself because that would destroy the entire moral foundation of the law. In other words, you don't get to become president and then write yourself a get-out-of-jail-free card. That door is now slammed shut. What this ruling does to presidential accountability. For decades, America quietly lived with an assumption that the president is almost untouchable, that prosecuting a former leader would be too explosive, too messy, too dangerous. But that era is ending. This ruling pushes America closer to what many other countries already do. In places like South Korea and France, former presidents have faced trial, even prison. America avoided it for generations. But now, the highest court in the land is essentially saying no one is above the law, not even the one who once sat on the throne. The impeachment point is the warning shot. There's one more detail here that doesn't get enough attention, but it might be the most important. The court stated there is no immunity for crimes that could lead to impeachment. That's massive, because it means if a president commits an act serious enough for Congress to remove them, they don't get to hide behind immunity after the fact. The political process and the criminal process now link together like a chain. Impeachment removes power, and prosecution punishes the crime. So a president cannot do something catastrophic, get impeached, and then walk away untouched. This is the court drawing blood from the idea of presidential untouchability. And now the legal landscape shifts. In the past, presidential legal accountability was like a maze, with multiple exits: delay the case, claim immunity, wait it out, use politics, use procedural loopholes. Now, the Supreme Court is blocking those exits. It's turning the process into a straight road. End of term, then trial, then verdict. And that changes everything. Because from this moment forward, what matters most is no longer the argument about can we prosecute. Now it becomes, can you prove it? Evidence, witnesses, documents, phone calls, meetings. Because facts don't disappear just because power once existed. What happens next? Expect intense legal battles in the lower courts. Not because the case dies, but because the definition of official act becomes the new battlefield. Judges will hold fact-finding hearings to determine which conduct is protected and which isn't. And once that's settled, trials could move faster than ever, because prosecutors now have a map. They know where the immunity is weak. They will focus heavily on acts done as a candidate, as a private individual, and anything tied to personal or campaign benefit. That's the zone where protection drops to zero. And the stakes are terrifyingly real. Let's be honest, the federal charges in major cases are not symbolic. Document-related crimes can carry 10 to 20 years. Obstruction can carry 20 years. Election interference charges can carry long sentences. And when you do the math, if someone is convicted and sentenced to 20 to 30 years at age 78, that's not just a sentence. That's a life ending. That's dying in custody. That's not exaggeration. That's reality. That is what makes this moment so explosive. Because now legal survival and political survival are fused together. And when those two collide, history doesn't move slowly. It moves violently. So make no mistake about what we just witnessed. The Supreme Court has now established that the presidency is not a shield with no limits. It's a shield with boundaries. And the D.C. Circuit has reinforced that power cannot be used to erase accountability through self-pardons. America's legal system has entered a new era. An era where presidents still have immense authority, but not unlimited protection. And the long-term effects of this decision will ripple across politics, law, elections, and leadership for decades. The rules have changed. The exits are closing. And now, the race toward the courtroom has never been clearer.